Welcome to How to Stay on Budget and Innovate and reduce risk and time and save money and cost and become a hero in your own organization. My name is Mike Sheldon. I'm the CEO of Curvature. I'll spend a little bit of time, just a little at the end, telling you more about Curvature, but we're a global hardware maintenance and solutions provider. The topic today is one that Gartner and Curvature have really been talking about for a few years. This is our third year at this show, and the message has evolved, I think, as Gartner's own research has evolved, and it really meshes a number of ideas that start with the idea or the reality that everybody has to cut costs. There's no unlimited budgets. At least you probably wouldn't be at my talk if you had one. So if you do, good on you. But Gartner's published a number of research papers beginning with recognizing that the life cycles of equipment in the network are lengthening greatly in many cases. This has to do not just with budget pressure, but with something that we call sufficiency. When you had an Ethernet network, and then fast Ethernet, and then gigabit, there were real business needs to upgrade to those new capacities. When you have a gigabit to the desktop, 10 gigabit data center network, there's very little that network for most enterprises can't do. So the lifespan is enabled to lengthen through the very nature of the sufficient, sort of like flat screen TVs. I don't know when I'm going to buy my next TV that's 65 inches, 4K. I can't imagine the next one I'll buy. They've talked about the secondary market for hardware. As lifespans of equipment lengthen, hardware in IT is no different than a car, but even more severe. You might get 50% off, so that $10,000 item is $5,000 when you buy it. It's $3,000 the next day, and it's $1,000 in 3 years. If you were going to use something for 10 years, why would you pay $5,000 for something that's more incrementally better than something that's $1,000? And you can still get 60, 70% of its life. And Gartner's also talked about third-party maintenance and how in tactical situations, which are more and more frequent given the lengthening life cycle of equipment, you can use third-party maintenance to cut OpEx. We weave these together using Gartner's recommendations and certainly our own experience into a strategy that we'll talk about today. We have all of the Gartner literature that I reference up here. We're happy to provide you. You're all Gartner customers. You can get the data at the end. So let's look a little bit more about refresh cycles. Refresh cycles are at the heart of a lot of this. Everybody has to purchase equipment. That's CapEx. Everybody then maintains the equipment. And one of the things Gartner's written about extensively is how, from a total cost of ownership standpoint, the OpEx can exceed the CapEx over a 5 or 6 year life. You spend the aforementioned $5,000 on a switch, the SmartNet maintenance is over $1,000 a year. Well, 5 years later, you spent more on OpEx than CapEx. What you get for that OpEx spend is generally three things. You get hardware replacement, that's obvious. You get tech support, that's the most commonly used offering. And you get software updates. And it's software updates that the manufacturers use as a cudgel, if you will, to browbeat its customers into both upgrading needlessly and keeping things on maintenance far longer than they have to be. And the reasons are simple. If I were to look at any one of your estates, and it's not an absolute state-of-the-art, latest and greatest infrastructure, my guess is 50% or more of your equipment is not eligible for software updates or gets them for free, which means the very thing that the manufacturers are using as a tool to get you to buy their expensive maintenance isn't available in the first place on that equipment. When updates are available, and I have an interesting anecdote here, they're infrequently applied. It's no secret that to update software, you have to take the device offline. We had a client that was a maintenance customer of ours for many years. They got a new CIO, came from Dimension Data, very much drank the Kool-Aid, put everything back on SmartNet at a 4x cost, $4 million over 1. A year later, that guy was gone. A new person had come in, and he asked for essentially a report. How'd we do? We spent all this money on SmartNet. How'd we do? Of 1,200 6509 switches, 3 had been updated. They went back on our maintenance the next year and saved $3 million. They're hard to do. Taking a core data center switch offline when you're a hospital or a financial institution is not the easiest challenge, not the easiest thing to do. And finally, software is available a la carte. And more than that, critical vulnerability updates are made available by almost all manufacturers for free, independent of a maintenance contract. You add all those things up, and you get what Gartner calls the strategy bimodal IT. With all respect to Gartner, I'm not sure I like the name. It doesn't speak to me. It's pretty commonly understood as just the 80-20 rule. If you focus your spending on what will absolutely move your business forward and let the rest live as long as it can, and rather than, and Gartner writes this in one of their papers, rather than use an arbitrary life cycle dictated by the OEM, say every 4 years, look at each device type and come up with a life cycle that's appropriate for that device, you end up with probably 80% of your network living much longer and needing less frequent upgrades than you've done in the past. Security, wireless, data center switching, there are a number of areas that require frequent upgrades and technology is advancing rapidly. Edge switching, edge routing, VoIP telephones, there are a whole bunch of devices, however, where a 3 or 4 year old device has a 5 or more year life ahead of it. And can anybody guess what the mean time between failure is of a typical Cisco switch? They end of life them about every 3 years, or come out with the next generation every 3 years. Mean time between failure is 34.2 years. So if it's working, it will keep working in all likelihood. And when there's a problem, they're easy to fix. So digging a little deeper into what devices we would recommend you focus your innovation on and spending, and which you can probably let live a little longer. On the access layer, it's clearly wireless. Wireless is advancing so rapidly. Devices are proliferating so rapidly. Very few companies have invested enough in wireless where workgroup switching can live much, much longer. On the edge, again, it's security. Most companies have probably underinvested, even if they focused on security, where edge routing and switching can remain much longer. And in the data center, for some companies, the advent of 40 and 100 gig offers real performance advantages. In other cases, it would be transparent to the users and why do it. But storage and compute will likely be added to, but not so often replaced in most organizations. So why? I think the reality is we can't predict the future. If we could predict the future, well, take a step back. If we could predict the future, I'd be on that big giant yacht that Russian guy drives around from San Francisco to LA, and I wouldn't be here. But I'm here because I can't. What we do know is the past. We do know what happened between 2006 and today. And what I'm going to do now, very briefly, is go back to 2006 with a representative infrastructure that many of you could have been running, generated by our most senior network engineers. And then we have all the detail. If you'd like to see SKU by SKU, this is meant to be an absolutely realistic picture. And we start with one company at the same spot in 2006. One follows the OEM's recommendations for relatively frequent and expensive upgrades and OEM maintenance, and one follows a different path. And we'll see where they end up. Well, as I said, this is a high-level view. If you're really interested in the actual SKUs, we're happy to share that with you. But this is a 5,000-person company, $1 billion in revenue, access layer, network layer. We're going to ignore the data center, though it would make the example even bigger for just ease and simplicity. So this is the access network and network edge. In the data center, switching, not servers, you've got high-end 6509s with 10 gigabit. And like I said, this could be anybody. This could be a hospital chain. This could be a convenience store, a pharmaceutical company, a regional bank. Let's look at 2006. In 2006, you had a number of things happening with technology. You had 64-bit CPUs, changing the game completely on the compute side. You had gigabit switching, likely already implemented. You had 10 gigabit becoming more pervasive. The OEM would tell you to invest in all of these things. The alternative suggests be selective. Definitely invest in 64-bit. Definitely use 10 gig in the data center. But if you've got gigabit to the desktop, let it keep going. And your VoIP needs can be addressed through software without necessarily a hardware upgrade. What does this mean in practice? And I won't spend too much time on this sheet, but in practice, it means dramatically less CapEx and OpEx using the alternative path with little to no user-recognized difference in performance. 2.3 million versus under a million, $1.3 million savings just in 2 years. As we walk through this decade, obviously everything changed in 2008-9. No one had the money to do all the upgrades they wanted to or were recommended to do. But you also had some real changes happening. You had Ethernet taking over from T1. You had solid-state storage. You had even more and less expensive 10 gigabit becoming pervasive in your networks and data centers. Again, following the OEM's recommendations versus the alternative, you could upgrade the entire router or add a module. You could upgrade edge switching or let it live another 2 years. The reality, 2.5 million versus well under a million. Again, the point here was with little to no discernible difference in performance to your users. 2011 to 2016, many companies continue to experience an economic crunch, particularly in Europe. But now you've got even more to spend money on. You've got wireless, cloud, security concerns, 40 gig and 100 gig. Be selective. Invest in 100 gig if it's meaningful. Don't if not. Use 40 instead of 100 if you have to upgrade. Absolutely spend money on wireless, but wait on software-defined everything. No one knows what it's even going to be yet. Why are we spending money on it? And so forth. When you extend that out, you get another massive difference in investment. And where you end is a set of equipment, again, if you're curious, I'm happy to share this with you, where the capacities, speeds, and performance to your users is virtually identical. The N minus half a generation equipment under the alternative is virtually functionally equivalent to the equipment on the right. And over that 10-year period, you save $6.8 million on a $10 million spend. In this example, the assumption is security devices, wireless controllers, and others are all kept on OEM maintenance. And you're leveraging the ability to discern between device types for your savings. The reality is, though, it's not just about the savings. If anyone's done a big forklift network upgrade, or even a rolling upgrade over many years, the CapEx spend on the equipment is probably the least impactful of that project. The downtime and project management and outsourced labor and replacements and configuration problems and intercompatibility issues can often swamp the cost of the hardware itself. By minimizing these types of upgrades, you also minimize all of those headaches. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the most recent news around a company that used state-of-the-art Nexus 3000 switches. They were a hosting company with a large game of war, I think was the company. Client invested $30 or $40 million in brand new Nexus switches and were bankrupt 6 months later as the switches were buggy. And their 5 nines availability led to multiple 10-hour outages. The risk of these upgrades are real. And time again, in the first couple years of life, you see significant downsides to implementing the latest and greatest technology, whereas the N-1 generation continues to function appropriately. So now we look into the future. Again, I hope to be on that big white yacht that looks like a submarine. But if I'm not, in 10 years, we've seen gigabit become 100 gigabit, wireless go from non-existent to mission critical, security go from something that was kind of nice to have to staking our jobs upon it. What is the next 10 years going to hold? Well, it's certainly software-defined all sorts of things. Network, storage, compute. It's cloud. It's virtualization, which is already here but increasing. The demands and the uncertainty around the future have never been greater. And yet the urgency to cut cost remains. So why aren't you hearing about this from your traditional IT partner? And I think that's not a mystery, but just to say it out loud, the IT OEMs and their VARs make money by selling you things wrapped in cardboard. If you're not buying the next thing and putting it under maintenance, they're not making any money. And yet it is these very companies that for 2 decades have dictated, arbitrarily in most cases, the upgrade cycle that many of you still follow today. The replacement of a gigabit switch 3750X with a 3650 is nice, and I'm sure the engineers at Cisco were very busy producing it, and it's a better switch, but it's absolutely incrementally better and not game-changing. Do you need to do those upgrades every 4 or 5 years? I would argue no. The strategy is not black and white. It's something where we and other companies that do what we do would sit down and consult with your specific estate of equipment and look line by line, device type by device type, and decide which strategy is the best fit. But this is what we do as an organization. This is what Curvature does. And we couldn't be more delighted that Gartner has begun to push back on some of the OEM mandates that have been present for so long. Our model is based on leveraging, I guess I'll stay on this, leveraging third-party components. I haven't mentioned those yet, but Gartner's going to publish a note, I hope, in the next year talking about the single biggest ripoff in networking is optics. A $15 optic is sold for $1,000. You can get it for $50. We sell 100% compatible optics, memory, hard drives, and all of the commoditized components at a huge discount. We sell secondary market equipment, generation N-1 and N-2. We are a very large global company, so this is not an opportunity available to you in the United States. It's available in more than 100 countries, 17 languages, with distribution centers and depots all over the world. We are truly global. These options of third-party maintenance and hardware delivery are available to you in 100 countries. Support is 24/7 with 4-hour delivery, as I said, in 17 languages. This is not an SMB offering. This is an offering that virtually any company of any size could avail themselves of. And before I take questions, I've got some specific examples of companies that have leveraged these opportunities. But beyond hardware, both new and used, beyond third-party components and maintenance, we've also wrapped it all in a variety of professional services, including an objection or a solution to the most common objection to implementing this strategy. And that is, if I've got devices all over the world in the field, and I've spared a couple, I've got some on third-party maintenance, I've got some on OEM maintenance, how do I know, what do I do on Saturday night at midnight when I have a problem? Well, one of the solutions we've offered is a portal that allows you to manage all of your infrastructure in one place. We'll act as the first call for all of your contracts. And if it turns out to be under OEM maintenance, we'll patch you through. And if you'd like, we can even do incident management and report on a unified basis of all your incidents, of all your device types across all manufacturers at the end of every month as part of our QBR process. In addition to data center relocation and a bunch of other services that allow this strategy to be fully implemented. Some real-world examples. Municipal government in California, this is a pretty simple one, was facing a large CapEx spend when 170 systems went end of support. They were spending $500,000 a year on support. We're maintaining them for $125,000, and that CapEx is deferred indefinitely, as this city has no intention of upgrading these devices for many years. 5-year savings of almost $2 million. And this is on an IT budget of less than $1 million for infrastructure each year. But it does scale. $6 billion pharmaceutical company. All over the world, 335 data center systems, almost 7,000 networking devices. We're maintaining roughly half their network in, I think, roughly 50 countries, 37 countries. $1.1 million reduction in OpEx and a deferment of more than $10 million of CapEx in doing so, with a $15 million approximate savings over 3 years. This company's made multiple acquisitions. They're trying to make sense of that infrastructure. Since a year and a half ago when we first signed this deal, we're now selling them equipment so they can standardize equipment across their network. We're buying back the legacy equipment they're not using. We're installing it for them as part of a professional service. And we're consulting on their next 5-year roadmap so that they can really focus, again, with 5 or 6 different corporate networks to manage, they can really focus on that which is going to move the ball forward and not spend so much time and energy and brain damage on the things that users are not even going to notice. And finally, a deal I worked on personally, large chain of convenience stores across the US and Canada. They came to us having just finished upgrading 4,000 stores in the US. The cost per store was roughly $7,000 for this equipment, and yet by the time they were done with the implementation in the US, that equipment was no longer available. So they were faced with buying the next generation equipment, which was a little more money. And the idea that they would have all these stores with different types of equipment in them was not something they were excited about. Curvature sold them the exact same equipment they had just implemented for $2,500 a store, and it cut their OpEx across all 5,000 stores from from $600 a year to $250 a year per store. And that includes keeping all of their mission-critical devices under OEM support. And we act as the concierge for all of it. While a relatively large company, this was a $10 million savings over 3 years, and absolutely changed the game for them. They're now investing heavily in the cloud. They're upgrading all the wireless networks, which was deferred as part of this project. And we've now been working with them for more than 5 years. The value of this strategy is real, and you can speak with Mark Fabi or Andrew Lerner or Christine Tennyson or a number of Gartner analysts about it. We work with companies of every size, from very small regional organizations all the way up to the largest investment banks and telecoms. It is being increasingly adopted. The maintenance and professional services side of our business is the fastest growing segment of our business by far. And we've got customers of every shape and size all over the world that we'd be happy to put you in touch with if you'd like references. We are here at the show in booth 336, and I'll open it up for questions in just a minute. We do have a number of people from Curvature here if you'd like a more detailed conversation that will be available at the back of the room at the conclusion of this talk.